Hello, my name is Veskimeister and I'm the founder of Parcel Lockers Central. Today we are talking about not about parcel lockers, but about servicing parcel lockers. And and today's guest is João Lopes from Bloq.IT. Hi, João. Hi, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for the invitation. Always great talking about anything related to parcel lockers.
Yeah, it was last week that I reached out to the community with a post about service companies in Europe, and you were one of them who replied with a message is that you are already also engaged with servicing parcel lockers for your existing clients like Vinted and DHL. So tell me a little bit, what is your status with servicing area, and what have you been experiencing there?
Sure. I'll just provide a little context on why we're doing servicing in the first place. So, back when we were starting our flagship project with Vinted, we basically were looking, well, Vinted in this case was looking for a full solution provider. So, one source that would allow them to just launch everything from lockers, software, and servicing as well. And we had to basically comply with that, even though at the time our focus was really just on, locker and software. We still had to comply with the actual servicing of those lockers. And that includes deployment, maintenance, warehousing, logistics, all the stuff that allows you to, get a smart locker network on the ground up and running. And we started looking for different providers, and the truth is we couldn't find anybody that was very specialized. So we had to get a little bit creative. So we would go and find, well, what's the most similar thing? Companies doing maintenance on ATMs, companies doing maintenance on all sorts of vending machines, you name it. And we started looking for these. And from the start, we wanted to get like a bunch of providers because, again, we were going to a new market. So we wanted to make sure we were not getting ripped off, or we wanted to make sure we could channel volume to the right, people, and we had the right capacity if something happened all of a sudden, all those kinds of things. And we started working with these subcontractors, and we've realized that one of the most important things was to have good technology and good processes really in place, both for deployment and maintenance. Both operations are quite important, and they do end up being very costly if not done properly. And so we kept using these contractors, but we started building a lot of processes on our side to make things more efficient, right? So making maintenances more effective, reducing even the need of maintenances in the first place by creating, tools and software around the lockers that would allow us to preemptively understand what's going on, to remotely fix issues, to diagnose, troubleshoot, and to make sure that whenever we need a maintenance, if it's really needed, it happens and it's successful. So the person when gets there already knows exactly what to do, already knows what to report back, and we're very confident that that maintenance is successful. Um, Same thing for deployments. We wanted to make deployments fast, easy, besides just the actual machine, putting it on place, also making the entire process of, uploading all the information of that machine, validating that the machine is working, launching it live. All these things need to be easy. And when you're doing it at scale, if you don't have a good process, it gets very messy and becomes very time consuming, and you create a lot of potential errors, basically. So deploying 10 lockers is not a problem. Deploying 1,000 of them, does become a little bit of a problem if you don't have the right process in place. By doing this in 1 year or less, we're actually able to scale our capacity to do DNM quite extensively. So in 2023, which was the last year, we deployed over 1,200 lockers in France, in 9 different cities. And these are a mix of indoor, outdoor units in different sorts of locations, and also obviously maintaining those machines. And yeah, so we've gathered a lot of experience, and we've basically used that experience to improve our product and make it even easier and faster to deploy and maintain. So that's a little bit about why we're doing deployment and maintenance. Essentially, we just want to offer us a full turnkey solution to our customers. We've realized there was nobody that we could trust completely on this process, so we started doing a lot of the things on our own, the key parts, the processes, the technology, and then obviously subcontracting some of the actual work. Yeah.
So fascinating, absolutely. But tell me about your practical experience now. what are the SLA terms from the clients, or what is the client demand? How quickly you have to respond, in a sense that if parcel locker is out of order, is it a matter of minutes, days, weeks? What is the average response time required for
Yeah.
this kind of service?
So when we're building capacity, we have to think about deployment and maintenance as separate operations. So at Bloq.IT, we actually have a DNM team, and it's an actual unit inside Bloq.IT. And then inside that unit, there's an entire deployment basically structure and an entire maintenance structure. And these are different people, different skill sets, and different tools for the most part. When you're talking about deployment, you do have to build that capacity. Just to give you an idea, I think our peak day last year we deployed over almost 60 lockers in a single day. So obviously there's a lot of planning involved. There's also some SLA that you have to follow there, right? Because for location, if you want to expand the network fast, and everybody wants to expand the network fast, a lot of times the other step is actually signing the location, right? So once the contract is signed, everybody wants the locker to be installed as fast as possible, right? So in terms of deployment, there's obviously a lot of things that are negotiated because you want to make sure that you have you can secure the right capacity. In terms of deployment teams, in terms of workforce, you need to make sure you have all the warehouses in place, etc., the vehicles, the tools, etc. So in terms of deployments, I think what we've seen as being a good number for us is from the point we sign a location between a week and a half and 2 weeks, typically that locker will be deployed. The reason why it takes a while is because when you're doing it at scale, you need to put it in the pipeline of deployments, and you basically have this constant flow of deployments, and then with 1 or 2 weeks of time, you can basically manage, forecast and manage the actual capacity that you have. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you have like people, sitting because there were not enough new locations signed. You also don't want to be in a location where all of a sudden the sales team does very well and signs a bunch of locations, and you have a locker just sitting in the warehouse because there's not enough capacity. So it's always like a close balance. And in order to do this, you need to create a really good link between the actual sales team, so the teams that are not at Bloq.IT, but in our partners, basically closing the contracts and getting the location signed, etc., and then our deployment teams. And this process seems simple at first, becomes really complex. Mostly when you're talking about outdoor deployments. I mean, an outdoor deployment, I typically say, is 3 times the effort of an indoor deployment because the process is much bigger, right? A lot of times you might have to do more extensive surveying because you need to understand if a location, actually is safe to receive a locker, what kind of potential site adaptations are needed there. You need then to, if there are site adaptation needed, you need to actually conduct the work to, prepare the place to deploy a locker, and then actually do the deployment. For indoor locations, typically much faster. Just do a more basic survey, understanding if the place is accessible and easy to deploy, and then you just go there, typically install the unit. You don't need to do a lot of work. Also, the lockers are typically smaller, so you can also deploy them faster. So just in terms of deployment, things range a lot. But I would say 2-3 weeks from the location sign to deployment is really a good mark, let's say. When it comes to maintenance, it's a different story. Obviously, expectations are much higher. You need, if somebody has if a locker doesn't work, and if our partner has a lot of volume going to that locker, that creates a big issue because you could impact a lot of parcels technically, a lot of users really in one place. So what we've seen from our side and what we're basically offering and walking towards is a 24-hour SLA for this type of issues. So the idea is, if there's really an impactful issue, no more than 24 hours, a locker should be out of service. That's basically it. We've done in the past, and sometimes depending on the capacity, we can obviously fulfill this faster. We've done multiple times in the past where we can do same day fixing, stuff like that. Mostly if we're talking about a cluster that has a lot of lockers, because then you can have more capacity to reserve at all times there. But typically a 24-hour SLA I think is a really good target to aim at.
Yeah, this is for sure. If you have a locker with a tens of parcels inside and tens of clients waiting, so there is no time to waste. This is for sure. But as I understand from your description, again, you have sort of innovated and turned this service as a software project, not so much anymore as a field work, in a sense that what you're doing is actually you are creating and developing the software to manage capacity?
Yeah. So in a sense, I think it's a mix of software and then the processes, right? So you need to have the right processes in place to make it, operation is, at scale and in the different markets, etc. It's really about making sure you have a good process, right? So, how does the information flow? Once the location is signed, what's the flow of information until the locker is deployed, right? You need to create a system that works at scale, that, multiple people can use, you just need to make sure the process works well. Same thing for maintenance, right? Like you just need to make sure you have the tools and the processes to make sure things happen correctly. Software definitely helps a lot, right? Because having a good process is off the way there. Then you need to make sure you have the tools to fulfill that process at scale, right? If the process is very tedious, hard to keep track of, or allows for a lot of mistakes, then those mistakes will happen. And what we've done in terms of tooling is mixing two things really. So the first one is really improving our own product to make sure that we can deploy fast, both from a physical perspective of the actual machine, but also the software part, making sure you can upload lockers quickly, make sure the information is all there, all these basically checks that you have, and making sure that that flow doesn't take a lot of time. But then also at the hardware level, obviously you want to make sure that the lockers are easy to deploy. And then in terms of maintenance, it's kind of the same thing. There's, again, a lot of tools that you need to be able to use. Some of them are internal. We've developed a feature that we call Bloq.IT Vitals, and it's basically an entire part, let's say, of our software offering that focus specifically and only on maintenance and network reliability, let's say. And there's a mix of different features there that allow us to first monitor the network at all times. So if something goes wrong, we would know that something is wrong before we actually get a report. And this allows us obviously to act much faster because, if something goes wrong, you want to know right away. You can start the maintenance need or the actual fix before you even get a report. If you need to get a report from a user, then that gets to you, then you investigate it. It's always going to take longer. So there's a lot of monitoring tools there that basically can monitor the entire subset of the network. So let's say a network has 1,000 lockers, you'll be basically instantly notified when the locker goes offline and it's not supposed to, if it goes out of power, if the screen stops answering, all these different things that we've basically created to actually make sure we know what's going on and know when something goes wrong. And then all the tools to troubleshoot things. So when something goes wrong, if we had a report, maybe it wasn't notified by our monitoring system because, some issues you can't really, get all the time, is making sure that we can remotely, through our support function, we have a centralized support function that really knows the system well. And whenever a ticket comes along, they can go straight into that unit, try to understand exactly what went wrong there, do a few tests. A lot of times things end up being fixed remotely. When not, then they can call a maintenance intervention. And when that maintenance intervention is called, then almost 100% of the times what's the actual component that is giving issues, what kind of tests you need to perform, what kind of replacements you need to do, and then make sure that you have a very high rate of success on the first visit. If you don't have these tools, what happens a lot of times is if you just have the field people, an issue is reported, it will basically go to some place. It will then go to the maintenance team. Maybe if multiple hours already passed by the time the maintenance crew actually gets a report, then they have to schedule somebody. That person might not actually have any clue about the locker or the issue that happened by the time they get to the locker. Then they have to investigate on the field. They have to potentially apply a fix. If they don't have the right spare parts with them, they might need to go there a second time, which again adds them the 24 hours or 48 hours depending on the SLAs. And you could technically get to this position where you have a locker that is out of service for 5, 6, 7 days in some cases, just because you don't have that knowledge. And when you do have that knowledge, maybe it takes you 24 hours and the person goes there, fixes everything, and the problem is solved. So definitely having information is a key component in our view. And we do think there's a lot of value in having sort of this middle layer between the provider of the service, so the network operator, and the actual service provider, because this middle layer is a lot of times what will know enough about the operation and the system to know something is going wrong and to instruct the part below on how to perform that service to fix things. If you don't have them, there's basically disconnect because these guys don't actually understand the product that well. They might not even know about the operation that closely. They don't have access to a lot of information. And that just makes it very much harder to perform a good service, let's say.
Yeah, because there is also the scale effect because if you have some kind of smaller parcel locker network with hundreds or even thousands of the lockers, then basically you can handle it with a Excel and then phone with
Yeah.
phone contact with the service guys. But if the number gets bigger, then to handle the data flow, it's not feasible anymore manually. So this is. But did I understand you right that you have sort of created the new product for that in a sense that involves first of all preventive maintenance or some kind of scheduling for preventive. Then there are tools of software that will monitor every second, every heartbeat of the lockers to find abnormalities and then to react on that. And then you have sort of service scheduling and projecting part.
Yeah.
So this is a sort of the whole different software set
Yeah.
to support the whole both deploy and on top of that there was a deployment part. So there are
Yeah.
4 or 5 different modules inside of that.
Exactly. So it's basically a mix. So some things obviously we do part of our own solution, part of the Bloq.IT OS. A lot of these monitoring stuff, being able to check what's going on with the locker, remote troubleshooting. These things are part of the solution. But what we did essentially is interface with third-party solutions that allow us to do this well. So obviously we don't have interest in creating a ticketing system from scratch, right? I mean, there's tons of ticketing systems out there that work very well. So what we've basically did is a mix of things. So while we have a lot of functionality that is locker specific in our system and that is very unique and that we developed that on our own, then we have basically integrated with different tools. So like a ticketing system, obviously, then we have also some software to actually manage the maintenance providers, basically making sure we have the agendas of our technicians or the technicians that we have access to, that they can easily access all the information about the locker. They can go on the site, they can do the work, that updates their spare part management tools. Then that gives us backup reports. So all these things that you need to basically do, we have that inside of our basically suite. Obviously some things are more third-party tools, some of them are more internal, but at the end of the day the important thing is that everything works together and you do have those tools available, and that allows you to improve the system a lot and the service in general.
Now, from the practical experience you are having, what is your guess or guesstimate? How much of the problems or tickets you are having on the lockers is sort of software related, and what part of them is actually whether hardware or metalwork related? Do you have some kind of glue how those
Yeah.
things split?
So I would say that it's a good sign that you get to a point where 100% of the issues are hardware, right? Because hardware issues, I mean, you can't go around them. You can make the strongest locker, you can make all sorts of things. There's always going to be some issues, like somebody breaks the screen, or some water goes into some locker and then does something, or some user uses the locker wrong, and it's a parcel that is too big and the locker gets stuck. These things will always happen. Like they're part of the service. The product just has those kind of things happening. When you have a software issue, it kind of indicates that something is going wrong. This can also happen. But ideally, you should, as you start getting those, fix them, and then get to a point where the service is so stable that you don't have the so-called software issues. A lot of issues can be fixed remotely, for sure. These are typically, configuration issues. I mean, the locker has a lot of components. All of them are different, and sometimes some things conflict, which might lead the locker to a different state than what it should be. Our view at Bloq.IT is that it's very important to make sure that whoever is doing maintenance and support and servicing on these machines has some sort of knowledge about the product and also direct access to whoever is developing that product. The reason for that is you will, when you deploy, run into issues that you couldn't catch during Q&A. That's normal, right? Like you're gonna test, hopefully, your system a lot before launching it, but after it's launched, there's a lot of integrations, there's always some customization for each partner, each company has their different solution. Those problems will appear. It's important that when you catch those live, the person who's catching them has knowledge of the system so they can understand why those happened. they can try to then replicate that in their own environment and ideally launch a fix that prevents that from happening in the first place. So from our view, software is really about continuous development and improvement. This is something that we've been able to do a lot because since we have this proximity, at least in our network, to all the issues that actually happen on a day-to-day basis, we can then apply fixes to those that basically either prevent the issue from happening in the first place, or if not, if it's something a little bit outside of our control, at least allows us to recognize this issue and apply some sort of automated fixing. So let's say the locker detects a specific issue, we can't fix it through code, we make sure that the locker reboots itself without having somebody, even sending the command remotely. The locker just does it on its own. And by applying this approach, we've been able to drastically reduce the amount of issues that appear. And this is, again, one of the things that if you have just a maintenance provider on the field, you are not going to be able to get to this knowledge, right? Because there's going to be so much information lost in the middle because the person going there in the first place doesn't even recognize the issue potentially because maybe it was something that happened to a specific user, not to every user. And that makes things much, much harder. So yeah, again, ideally the breakdown should be 100% hardware, 0% software. From our own network, it's kind of tilting that way because again, we can basically fix everything. I can speak for other networks, but I do know in a lot of cases software issues can be an issue, configuration issues. But again, I don't have the data for others. For it's getting close to being almost heavily on these typical recurrent hardware issues that always happen. And we're basically having less and less and less stuff around software.
And now the most probably the most asked question from me when I was operating a network of more than 1,000 lockers, the most asked question was how many times somebody has been attempting to break into the locker somewhere. So and then my answer was actually during my time there was 0 incidents where somebody was trying to break in the lockers. What is your count number? Is there any attempt to break into the locker?
Yeah, to be quite frank, I don't think we've ever detected something like that. Maybe it will happen in the future. Sometimes people do damage lockers, but I think it's typically not related to them trying to break in. I think sometimes we do find some vandalism acts where people just decide that they want to break things, and if you try hard enough, you're going to be able to eventually break some stuff. One curious thing is our lockers. I mean, one of our biggest networks, the one with Vinted we have right now, is basically in France, where we have over, I think, 1,400 units by now, or maybe I don't even know the right number, but we have a lot of lockers there. And as you might know, France does have its occasional seasonal riots, which also tend to affect lockers. So we've had a few instances where lockers were completely destroyed during rioting, along other things, not only the lockers, but sometimes they get pretty aggressive, and we've had some lockers burned down, stuff like that. But other than that, we haven't really had any break-in or no major vandalism. It's also something that doesn't happen a lot. I think so far we've had maybe 2 or 3 lockers that were completely destroyed. We're talking about over thousands of units, so it's a pretty low incidence rate.
Absolutely. Exactly. This is my message that parcel locker delivery is safe in a sense that you can trust to deliver parcels through parcel lockers because they are safe and taking care there. What you are talking is definitely force majeure. You can't prevent this kind of violence, but yeah, for the theft and burglary, the lockers are secured. João,
I mean, if you have to take into account, just to add on this one, I mean, if we take into account the lockers that were completely damaged, that was maybe 34, 40 parcels in total out of these 2 or 3 lockers. I mean, we've processed over 3 million shipments last year. So if you take into account the percentage, it's extremely safe, much safer, certainly than the typical home delivery, where things, sometimes do get stolen or lost.
Absolutely, this is my experience also, and this is my message that parcel locker delivery is safe delivery method. So, João, it has been great talking to you. interesting topic. I think we are going to cover this topic more and more because this is actually where the value is. The value is not only for in capex but also in opex, and this is exactly the operating cost what we are talking about and how to save them. So it was really nice talking to you, and hope this area of business around parcel locker delivery is also developing.
Yeah, great being here and talking about this topic, and thanks for having me.
So again, reach out to every service-related company who thinks who is willing to participate in parcel locker servicing. So reach out to me or to Joao, and maybe there are ways to cooperate. So this is a growing industry and definitely interesting place to be. So thank you everybody, and have a good day.